Good morning, children. Today we will be discussing about Expressionism, and I will give you a deep analysis of the painting Scream by Edward Munch. In the last class, I gave you a brief history of art movements starting from academic art. We discussed realism, naturalism, and at the end, we talked about Impressionism. Here we talk about the arrival of post Impressionism first. So, here we have artists like Vincent van Gogh and Paul Gauguin, who are the representatives of post Impressionism. And they started to portray all those subjective visions on their painting with the use of bright colors and thick brush strokes. And it is said that they had to struggle a lot in the art market, which was already dominated by Impressionist works. So, this is the famous painting by Van Gogh. It is titled Starry Night, and here you see a complete breakaway from all those Impressionist styles. Here you see the emphasis is on the interior, emotional life, and there is this tumultuous depiction of the sky, which is completely a radical breakaway, a radical departure from all those previous, more naturalistic landscapes painted by Van Gogh. And here you see this landscape is rendered through all those curves and lines, which is actually evocative of the spirituality he found in nature. So, Starry Night is famous for advancing the act of painting beyond the representation of the physical world, the representation of the interior emotional life. So, that is why this painting is very important, a kind of a rupture from Impressionist styles, and it announced the arrival of post Impressionism. And now we come to Expressionism, that is the subjective reality on canvas. So, Expressionism emerged simultaneously in various cities across Germany, and it came as a response to a widespread anxiety about humanity's increasingly discordant relationship with the world. It tried to portray the anxiety, the anguish, the disillusionment human beings had during the troubled period of 20th century. And it came as a part, a reaction against Impressionism and also against academic art. And this Expressionism was heavily influenced by symbolist movement, which came out in the late 19th century. And Vincent van Gogh, Edward Munch, and James Ensor proved particularly influential to Expressionists. Mostly, all these artists belong to a part of symbolist movement and they inspired Expressionism. So the classic phase of Expressionist movement lasted from approximately 1905 to 1920. So here you see two paintings. One is the example of Impressionism and the other one, it is the example of Expressionism. You can see the difference. The difference is here. Now, in Expressionism, the artist painted their internal world. Expressionism, the arrival of Expressionism announced new standards in the creation and judgment of art. Art now meant to come forth from within the artist. Rather than depicting an external visual world, the art should come from within. And the standard for assessing the quality of a work of art became the character of the artist's feelings rather than an analysis of the composition. So, artists' feelings got depicted in those paintings. For them, art should come from within rather than depicting the external visual world. This term, expressionism, is thought to have been coined in 1910 by a Czech art historian Antonin Macek. And what he intended was to denote something which is opposite of Impressionism. In Impressionist paintings, you see the depiction of majesty of nature, depiction of the majesty of human form through paint. While in Expressionism, as I said earlier, it sought to express your inner life and used harsh and realistic subject matter. And you should note that the term was coined only in 1910, but Expressionism was there from Munch onwards. So this particular painting, Scream, came out in 1893. So from that period onwards, it is there, but the term got coined in 1910. So this is the painting that declared it all. Scream by Edward Munch. The original German title given by Munch to his work was The Scream of Nature, and the Norwegian title is Shriek. And you see the agonized face, which has become one of the most iconic images of art, which becomes a symbol of the anxiety of this human condition. So, before going to the painting, we will look at the artist first, Edward Munch. He was a troubled artist. His childhood, he went through a lot of tragedies. He confronted with death at a very early age. His mother died of tuberculosis when he was only 5 years old, and he lost one of his sisters to the same disease when he was only 13. And shortly afterwards, another of his sisters suffered from severe depression and was committed for life, while his brother died suddenly of pneumonia only a few months after his marriage. So he was traumatized by these successive tragedies. He was often affected by depression, which is regularly visible in his work. His artworks often dealt with the themes of anguish, melancholy, fear, death, and pain. In his own words, he said he wanted to express the most subtle states of mind through painting. So this is Edward Munch, and this is his painting titled Sick Child. So what is the scream? Actually, there is not one but 5 versions of the scream. There are three paintings, and then there is a pastel and a lithograph created between 1893 and 1917. So these are the 5 different versions of Scream. And this Scream is part of a series of painting which he titled Frieze of Life, the Frieze of Life. There are many theories regarding the moment of origin, and most importantly, we take a diary note by Edward Munch, which talks about his emotional response when he walked along a bridge. So, this is what he says. It was written on 22nd January 1892. He wrote these lines: I was walking along the road with two friends. Then the sun went, I went down. Suddenly the sky turned blood red, and I felt a breath of melancholy, an exhausting pain under my heart. I paused, leaning against the fence, tried to death. Above the blue black fjord and city, there was blood in tongues of fire. My friends went on, and I stood there trembling with anxiety, and I felt that a great, infinite scream went through nature. So, here, contrary to all those popular beliefs, the scream is not coming from that figure. It is coming from nature. It is not that figure who is screaming. The figure actually appears frightened, and he or she covers the ears to blur the deafening scream. So usually people believe that the figure is screaming. It is not the figure who is screaming. He is actually frightened hearing the long shriek. Here he hears from the nature. So, where did the scream come from in real life? There are many theories. It could be from the slaughterhouse nearby. There was a slaughterhouse near that bridge, maybe from there. Or could be from the mental asylum, which was also near, and where, as I said earlier, where one of his sisters were there. Maybe from there. However, it becomes the shriek that went through the whole nature, a shriek felt by artist. And we look at the elements of this painting. So Munch's approach to the experience of synesthesia. Synesthesia is the union of senses. There is this belief that one might taste a color, you can taste a color or smell a musical note. So here he presents this experience of synesthesia, that is the union of senses, where there is this visual depiction of sound and emotion. So here in this painting you have the visual depiction of sound and emotion. And this painting represents a key work for symbolist movement. And this is surprisingly a simple work, where you see minimum of forms but maximum expressiveness. There are three major areas in this painting. One is the bridge. You see here the bridge, and then there is this landscape of lake and sky. And Munch says that it is not the chair which is to be painted. So, this is his idea of painting. It is not the chair which is to be painted, but what the human being has felt in relation to it. You should not paint all those physical objects. Your painting should contain all those emotions you felt in relation to that. How you felt in relation to that chair should be painted, not the chair. So that was his idea, the idea of subjective vision he wanted to depict in painting. So here he chose to use an unrealistic style to paint his emotions. So he used this unrealistic style to paint his emotions rather than focusing on realism and perfectionism in art. And it actually, he tries to say, or he explained that he painted a moment of existential crisis. He tries to paint a figure which is tired, which is anxious, which feels claustrophobic. And we see that, as I said earlier, it consists of three main areas: the bridge, which extends at a steep angle. There is a steep angle from the middle distance at the left to fill the foreground. Sorry, there is this steep angle from the middle distance at the left to fill the foreground. And then there is this landscape of shoreline. Landscape of shoreline. There is, it can be a lake, or as he says, it can be a fjord. Fjord is something like, as you see in this picture, a fjord is a long, narrow inlet with steep cliffs on both sides. That is fjord. So it can be a fjord or a lake. And there is the sky, which is painted with curving lines in tones of orange, as you see in this picture: orange, yellow, red, and blue, green. And here you see that this foreground and background blend to each other. Background and foreground and background blend to each other. And this human figure is starkly separated from this landscape by the bridge. So this human figure is separated from the landscape with the railing of this bridge. And this figure has strict linearity, strict linear figure, when you compare it with the shape of landscape and sky, which is swirling and swaying. And there is this two faceless upright figures in the background, which belong to the geometric precision of the bridge. And while the lines of the foreground figure's body, hands, head take up the same curving shapes that dominate the background landscape. So the bodies, this figure's body, hands, head has this same curving shape. It is in a shape of swirling or swaying, just like as you see in the landscape. So here, what does it symbolize? This painting actually symbolizes the darkly troubled times which Munch was experiencing as he dealt with mental illness and trauma. And here he tries to depict it can be also said that he tries to depict a panic-stricken creature which is simultaneously corpse-like. It looks like a dead body. It doesn't have any features of a live person. His head, it doesn't contain ears, and it doesn't have all those facial features of a normal human being. So here, this is a panic-stricken creature which looks like a corpse whose contours are echoed in the swirling lines of the blood-red sky. And it is also said that in this painting, anxiety is raised to a cosmic level and ultimately related to the ruminations on death and void of meaning, which were the central tenets of existentialism. So here you see a terrified and terrifying face. Actually, Edward Munch had an earlier painting titled Despair, which came out in 1892. And so this is the painting as you see. So these two paintings are very similar. You see that they have very similar colors, very similar format and proportions. You see this picture. Everything is identical except for the main character. In the screen, you see that this man with the coat and hat is replaced by this mysterious figure. And this mysterious figure can be a man or a woman. We can't understand, as I said earlier, we can't understand whether this figure is living or a dead person. Is it wearing a dress or a coat? So we have this confusion. And there is this art historian, Robert Rosenblum, an art historian. He claims that this face may be inspired by a mummy of the Peruvian Chachapoya people. So this artist Edward Munch studied in Paris, and it is possible that he saw this mummy on a display in a museum there. So there is this striking similarities between this figure, this mummy figure, and the figure in the painting. Talking about the reception of the artwork, it was first shown to the public in 1895 at Blomquist Gallery in Oslo, Norway. And there were a lot of criticism against the painting initially, and many even questioned the sanity of Edward Munch. There is this one medical student who called him crazy. And on the painting in Norway's museum, there is this enigmatic inscription in the upper left hand corner which reads in Norwegian, can only have been painted by a madman. It was inscribed on the upper left hand of that painting. And it is said that it was Munch himself who put the phrase there in a note to his detractors, all those people who criticized him. So he tried to give a reply that he was a madman. So this is a masterpiece of all times. With its vibrant and unrealistic colors, it actually showed a new way of creating art. It is actually a turning point between all those symbolist and expressionist movements. In 2012, one of these versions screen was sold at auction in New York for $119.92 million. So it is still popular. It is something like masterpiece of all times. So what is the importance of screen? Here you see a revolt against academic art and all those naturalist elements you see in Impressionism, naturalist elements you see in Impressionist paintings, as you see in this Impressionist painting. And it articulated an important shift that occurred within Western culture around the turn of the 20th century. Here you see in 20th century, man cut loose from all the certainties that had comforted him until 19th century. There is this common belief that there is no God now, no tradition, no habits or customs, just poor man in a moment of existential crisis, facing a universe he doesn't understand and can only relate to in a feeling of panic. So here we see this modern man who have lost all the angers which binded them to the world. He is anxious, he is tired, and he completely loses all those things which tied him to the world. He is in a state of utmost uncertainty. There is no God to rely, there is no tradition, habit, and customs in support of men. Just poor man in a moment of existential crisis, facing a world he can't understand, or he can only relate to this world with panic, with fear. So here we come to the end of the lecture. Scream now has entered into popular culture, as you see. It is one of the, as I said earlier, it is one of the world's best known masterpieces, and it has been subject of numerous parodies. Starting from, you may use this emoji in your phone always. That is actually the parody. It is actually a parody of this painting, as you see in this picture. The emoji you use, and all these other depictions are also parodies which came out of this particular painting. So, as I said earlier, it still remains as one of the best masterpieces even now. So, here I stop. Thank you. Have a nice day.